Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini, and I'm back with video number 3 in our Nico Raglan sew along series. In this video, we are sewing up our t-shirt. Now for sewing with stretchy knits fabrics, I'm going to put in a ballpoint jersey needle. And this is a size 80-12 ballpoint needle, which I find tends to work really nicely for this kind of a weight of cotton spandex. All right, needle is threaded, bobbin is in. We're using a light gray polyester thread, and I need a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna press this one here that moves my needle over. You may need to adjust the settings, adjust the width, so you can move the needle position on yours. Whatever you use for your 1/4 inch guide, go ahead and follow that since that is the seam allowance that we're working with. Some machines you might need to put in a walking foot or make some adjustments for stitching through stretchy fabrics, especially starting up top here. This machine, I don't have to do anything to it. It works beautifully. So we're gonna start stitching here. Pull the pins before I get to them because I don't want to sew over any pins. Now the pattern tells you because we're using a straight stitch on stretchy fabrics, you want to stretch the fabric a little bit so that when you do stretch it after the seam has been sewn, it doesn't just pop all the stitches out on you. So just give it a light tug as the machine pulls it through for stitching. Not too much, but just a little. And the stitches are so small, I don't even bother to backstitch. All right, so one seam down. Let me hop over to the other side. Let's stitch this one down, and then I'll meet you at the ironing board so we can give this a good press. All right, so let's give the 2 seams that we just sewed a good press. You can see how it's almost already starting to look like a t-shirt. So these are the seams that we sewed. I always like to press just as I sewed it. So keep it flat the way that you sewed it. I have some water in my iron because I want to steam it. And then I'll set that steam with my clapper. And you can see how that just flattens out everything super, super nicely. All right, we'll do that. I'm going to press the seam now kind of in the direction of the sleeve. A little blast of steam. Try not to stretch out the neckline, this curved area here too much. Try not to just mess with it because it's cut round here, so that's kind of a bias edge, and we don't want to distort the neckline. Same thing to the other sleeve. First flat, then I'll press it away. And remember, if you want to give this t-shirt a try, I also have a female version of the Raglan t-shirt and tank top that you can find. I teach a video course on it on my website. It's a paid-for class. It has over 32 step-by-step instructional videos teaching you how to do it. So if you are somebody who maybe has been in that class already, you'll be able to just watch along with this, and using the tips and tricks and everything I teach in that class, this Raglan t-shirt, the boys and men's version, will whip together super easily for you. All right, so let's head back to the work table so that we can attach the back of our t-shirt to the other edge of the sleeves here. And that is what you'll see when you look at your notches. You should have a double notch on the loose edge here on the back side of the sleeve. So these are my double notches. One notch typically refers to something on the front of the garment and a double notch on the back. So I know that the back of the shirt is going to go there, and we're going to sew it to the sides of the sleeves that have double notches. Next, let's grab the back piece of the t-shirt and put it in front of us with the pretty side facing up again, just like we did for the front. All right, so this is the back. And if I slide it down, I'll see that here I have my double notches. So these are the double notch slits here that should be matched to the same ones on the back of the sleeves. So now, flip the whole shirt over so that, again, it's pretty side to pretty side, like this. And let's match up the double notches from the sleeve to the double notches on the back of the shirt. there's one. And I'll scoot this over, do the same thing to the other side. All right, now let's head back to the sewing machine. Again, with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch here and here, just in the areas where we pinned. Now here's a tip if you're new to sewing garments. A lot of times taking the flat fabric and sewing it together in a way that creates this 3-dimensional shape of a shirt can throw you off because mentally you can't yet visualize how the garment is coming together. So what I like to tell my students is to forget about the rest of the fabric. Only focus your brain and your attention on the side or the seam that you pin together. Forget about all this that's flapping away in the wind. If you orient your fabric so that pretty sides are touching, if you match your notches, and you place your pins along the right side of what you're supposed to be sewing, then you are going to sew the correct seam. And as you proceed in the construction process, you'll start to see the project come together before your very eyes. So let's go again here. 1/4 inch, and I'm going to lengthen that stitch a little bit because it shrinks it down on this machine when I choose a 1/4 inch to 2 millimeters. We'll do 2.2 or even 2.4 is fine. Again, I'm tugging slightly on the fabric to give it a little stretch because we're using a straight stitch. If you want to go ahead and use a lightning stitch or a stretch stitch, because you know about that for stretch knit garments, go ahead and do that. It's going to take you a lot longer because that stitch is a really narrow zigzag. And I find that for this shirt, because it's not such a slim fitting t-shirt, it works fine because it's not getting as much stretch at the seams as, say, a rash guard or a bathing suit or dancewear would. All right, believe it or not, front, back, and 2 sleeves of the shirt have already been put together. Next step is to stitch down the sleeves and side seams and then attach our neckband. All right, let's give these seams a nice press. All right, so after sewing the single notches on the sleeves to the front of the t-shirt and the double notches on the sleeves to the back of the t-shirt, now we've pressed, and it might still look a mess, but notice, if you find the opening where your head is going to go, pinch it at the shoulders. We don't want to grab it from the neckline because you'll stretch it out some. Grab it from the shoulders, shake the shirt out a little bit, and then lay it down in front of you. You'll see the shape of the t-shirt. And you can tell just by looking at it like this, what is the next step in the construction process. So I see that this is my sleeve. I have my front, my back, and the shirt is inside out. The next step is to stitch down the sleeve and down the side of the shirt to put it together, right? Because this open sleeve here, this is what you have. The sleeves are both attached to the front and the back, but we need to shut the shirt to make it into an actual shirt. So that's what you would do, is flip it so everything is pretty sides touching. Grab your pins again, and you're going to grab one side here. Match the underarm seam here because you want that intersection, especially if you're using 2 different fabrics like I am. You don't want to have them be offset. You want them to match perfectly at that seam. So place a pin right there. You can send the seam allowance one in one direction and one in the other to reduce bulk. And then let's just place our pins down and down. You'll notice on the sleeve that it kind of is not, it's not straight, like it kicks out. That's to fold under for the hem. So still, just go ahead and pin there. Don't think that you did anything wrong. That is the correct shape. So when you sew your same 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to come here and then slightly pivot to come in this direction, then pivot and then come down. So just follow the shape of the shirt, but still keeping that 1/4 inch seam allowance consistent. When you come down the side here, you'll come upon a point that has the notches. So notice I didn't even think about it. I saw that it was right where it needed to be. So just go ahead and match those notches. And if they match up pretty easily, you know you cut everything accurately and your stitching is going to be nice and consistent. It's coming up to the right exact point where it should. So that's one side pinned. Instead of just sliding this over and pinning here, I like to actually flip. It makes it easier for me when I get to the sewing machine to sew, because that way when I sew this side, I can still keep the bulk of the project off to the left side, off the bed of my machine. It may not make much sense here, but you'll see it when you make one or when you watch me sew this up. Alright, so the side seams have been pinned in place. Now let's head back to the sewing machine, again with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, to stitch down under the sleeve and the sides of the shirt on both sides. Now that I'm done stitching one side, I flip it over and start again. So that's the reason I pin on one side and then flip the whole thing over and pin on the opposite side, because now it makes it so that the pins are sitting on top of the fabric and in the position where I want them to be, so that I can pull them out as I stitch. All right, so the shell of our shirt is done. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little press just in the spots where I sewed right now. Now let's move on to prepping our neckband so we can attach it here, because after that step is done, all you have left to do is to hem the sleeves and the bottom of the t-shirt. So for the neckband, we cut out the piece from the pattern, just as it was included, and put it in front of you with pretty side facing up. You'll notice that on a cotton spandex like this, most jerseys will want to roll to the pretty side, so I know that this is the pretty side. I'm going to grab both short ends, put them together, and I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance just down this short end. All right, so the stitching is done. I put the one strip together into a loop now. Let's open it this way. I like to press that seam allowance open, and then you're going to fold it onto itself, wrong side. So this is the wrong side of the strip of fabric, and I'm going to fold it onto itself, wrong sides touching, and match up the edge along the top. You're going to do this around the entire strip, like that. And then little by little, I press it to help set that crease in place. This is one place where you can definitely use steam and your clapper. Now to pin the neck binding, because this is such a close neck opening, because it's higher up on the neck, like a crew neckline, I like to just mark 2 points. One is already marked for me because it's where the seam is, where I connected the strip to make it into a round. And so if I hold that seam edge on one hand and I come across to the opposite side, that's going to give me the other half. And you can mark it with a pin, a chalk marker, whatever your preferred method is. I'll put a pin here since that doesn't show up too well. And then I just match these two up. The seam is going to be my center back, and then the other pin, I'm going to line it up here and kind of eyeball it to the center front. Also note that my shirt is wrong side out, so when you attach this and pin it in place, you want to make sure that you're attaching pretty sides, which should be either side of your strip here, to pretty side of the shirt. So I'm just going to eyeball the center and the back and place the seam right about there. And I'm matching raw edges. So raw edge of the shirt neckline with the 2 raw edges of the folded over neck binding. And I'll place a pin right there through all 3 layers. And then make sure that you have no twists in here. This is going to fall right inside the shirt neckline opening here. And so when I do that, the other halfway point is going to land somewhere here in the center front. So you can measure, but I just eyeball it. Center of the front neckline scoop here is going to be right about here. Somewhere there. All right. So I'm just going to bring this here and pin it in place. But now be careful. You cannot pin to the wrong side of this shirt here. You need to pin it to the right side. Remember, we said we're sewing pretty side to pretty side. Pretty side of the neck binding to pretty side of the shirt. And because the shirt is wrong side out, that's going to be the inside here. All right. And I find that on a small crew neckline, kind of like this, it's real simple. To start at the back, you'll start sewing here. And this is not enough room to kind of throw you off for the amount of stretch you have. So you can easily, as you stitch a couple inches, see how much more you need to stretch the neck binding so that you can reach this point, then go through it, and then do the same thing to stretch the last bit of neck binding to fit the other half of the neckline opening. And if you look at it like this, you don't have much to stretch. So don't start yanking on it too much and then end up with a rippled neckline. There's almost enough in here to fit easily. You can see that I won't need to stretch the neck binding much at all. So let's head over to the sewing machine. We're still working with a straight stitch. I'm working with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I like to start a little bit before, like in front of this direction wise of that center seam. So I can put it right where I want it, and I'll come around this way and stitch that neck band on. Now when we stretch the neck binding or neck band here, you can see I'm not stretching a lot. You only want to stretch the neck band fabric and not the shirt. This is all cut on a curve like this on the bias, and if you tug on the shirt, you're going to end up stretching out the neckline way bigger than what the pattern piece for the neck band is supposed to accommodate. So I like to put the neck band on my left hand, and with my right hand, I'm manipulating the fabric of the shirt without stretching it. Now I'm going to pull this way. Reaccommodate another 2 to 3 inches of my fabrics. And I'm tugging on the band fabric just a little. As you pull, you can start to see where your next stopping point is. This is the center front, and I can see that if I fix everything up, I don't have much of the neckband left to stretch in order to get me to that stopping point. So I know here I can ease up on the stretching now. When I come up to the center front, I can remove my pin, continue stretching and easing the fabric without stretching the shirt underneath. And that's it. I've reached the halfway point. I just need to repeat this to finish attaching it. Just make sure the fabric underneath the presser foot is smoothed out, the shirt fabric, so you don't end up stitching in any puckers or pleats in here. All right, and this is the last bit. So now I just need to stretch this to make it reach. And you can see as I'm working my way around to the starting point here, there's not much left to stretch. I can just tug on everything and follow it through. I like to stitch over my first initial stitches by a couple, or you can backstitch. All right, so here's what it looks like after I attach the neckband on, wrong side out. Let's flip it right side out and give it a press so you can see how nice it's gonna look. And for this, because it's a rounded area, I like to take a tailor's ham and slip it inside, pressing the seam allowance of the neckband there in towards the inside, you know, down into the shirt, and then hit it with some steam to get it to go around the curved shape of the neckline nicely. All right, and that's it for video number 3 in the Nico Raglan sew-along series. I hope you're enjoying following along. Remember, there's a link in the description box below where you can find the fabrics and the pattern that we've used in this video series. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below, and I will see you in the next video, video number 4, where I'm going to show you how to hem the sleeves and the t-shirt so we can finish it up.